Hey, Scott,
Mm-hmm.
this gold mix
Mix
mix it.
off.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
it's right, like I got it right here.
Yep.
Can you use that to fill cracks?
Absolutely.
Because I've been filling a crack and it just fills up, and then the next day it's like down
Yep.
quite
It's
a bit.
paint, so it dries.
Actually, it's acrylic ink, is what it is. It's actually an ink, so
Okay.
it's very thin. So if you don't want it to go all the way through, put a little dab of thin CA glue in there, and then lay that on top of it.
Okay, because I had just a small little crack that went all the way through. I put tape on the other side, and
Yep.
I know it's not leaking through that, and I just keep filling it every day.
Yep. You may have it's so thin and that you may take a while for you to fill it up all the way.
Oh,
And
okay.
it may
That's
be wicking into the wood too.
Yes, it is. Yep.
because
So
I was just wondering about that because it's not that it's using much, you
no,
know. It's just,
it doesn't. It goes a long ways, but yeah, I've noticed that too. That I've already had it wick all the way through a bowl and didn't realize the crack was all the way through until it showed up on the other side. Which for the bowl I was doing was it made it pretty neat.
yep. Well, that's what I'm doing as a bowl, and there's just a crack at the top. So I
Yep.
wanted to see how deep it was. So I was messing with it, and then it went all the way through. And I says, "Well, I'm just going to put some tape over the back, masking
Yep.
tape," and I've been filling it. And I know I got to fill the other opposite side with this because it's going to go down into it. But I think it's just evaporating away
It's
as
not evaporating away. It's just soaking into the wood until you
right.
get the wood sealed. It's just going to keep soaking in there.
Okay.
Yep. That's exactly what it's doing. Yep.
It's
It's
been like
not evaporating away because that's actually metallic powder in there. It's actually gold dust, is what it is.
yeah. So I was just leave it sit for a couple of days and then
Right. Yep.
do it again.
Just keep filling it, just like you'd fill a crack with anything else.
Yep.
The
Okay.
other option you can use is this aluminum. It's just by the same company, but
Yep.
it's called Gold Guild, and it's a
Yep.
little thicker than the other stuff, but it works exactly the same way. It's alcohol based by the same
Okay.
company.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think I got that one too.
yeah, you can use this one. It's a little thicker, Dan, so
Yeah.
it might fill your crack a little faster.
You could always also switch to an acrylic metallic gold paint and
Yep,
add a thickener to it and make
yep.
it, really thick, and you do that instead. Use that instead.
Yeah, because I was wondering if maybe you could mix that with epoxy.
Um, yes, you should be able to because it's alcohol based.
Yep.
Right.
I
I was
haven't tried it, but I would think you could.
yeah, because I was just wondering, you mixed it and you just kind of add a little bit until you got the color you wanted
Correct. Yep.
and then use it. So
Yeah.
oh,
Let us know how it works after you experiment.
yeah, I will when I get something to do it with because I'm working on this other one. It's about half full.
Well, how I do it, I usually try to find a board that's similar to what I'm turning. Maple board or something that's got a crack in the end, or part that you're gonna cut off anyways and throw away.
Yep.
And I save those little pieces for my experiments.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a lot of wood I can use for experiments. I think we all do.
Yep. I never do it on the piece that I want to do it on first. I always experiment on some kind of similar wood to see what it does.
Yeah, well, this just happened to be a hole, and I know that I seen that one that you did,
Yep.
And I said, well, maybe I missed something. Maybe you put something in it beforehand or
Nope.
whatever.
No, it took about, well, that one didn't go all the way through, so it took about 4 coats probably before it settled in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using when
Yes.
when I'm applying color when I'm applying color to things, I'm usually using sanding sealer before I get there. So that tends to seal up the wood decently, so that whether I'm airbrushing or painting, at least I've got a decent base on it, and I'm not being real crazy with the sanding sealer. I'm just, a couple of light coats to sand it back any raised grain or anything like that. But it also seals the wood so that you don't get things like alcohol ink wicking into the wood very much.
Right.
So,
Yep.
yeah, the spirit stain wicks. I've had that wick through a piece also. So that's an alcohol stain also.
Yeah,
So
and I know which piece he's talking about, Matt. That I wish I could show him because I just turned it off, but because I turned the piece into a different shape and I had to turn it off. But that was sealed with sanding sealer. Before I colored it, I colored the outside and then I filled the crack last and sanded it back. So it actually was sealed with sanding sealer. The alcohol pearl was put over the top. That was sealed with 1 light coat of lacquer, and then I put the gold in and sanded the lacquer back to get the gold off the lacquer because I didn't use a tape line because I didn't want a tape line. And I
right.
sanded it back and then resealed it with lacquer at the end. But it did take a couple of coats of that Mixol to make it fill that whole crack.
I know that
I imagine so.
that shellac sanding sealer, I had sealed it with that, but I couldn't get any tape to stick to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I use lacquer based sanding sealer.
Right. Yep.
so
I
that's,
use cellulose sanding sealer, which I think is similar to lacquer, isn't it, Matt?
It is. The shellac is known for nothing sticking to it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's real hard to put any kind of coat of anything else on top of shellac. I know that, including tape or anything else. So yeah.
Yeah. Usually if I'm gonna seal something and I know I'm gonna go back over the top of it, I don't use a shellac base. I use a cellulose base or like you say, the lacquer base.
I use
Yep.
shellac on this handle for that clamp and buffed it right in, and I put some a sanding paste that I made up over it with beeswax and what's that stuff called? Mineral, no.
Mineral
It's
oil?
yeah, mineral oil. And I mixed it all together, heated it up in a crock pot, and then put some grit, what's that stuff called? Earth Earth something. I got a bag of it right here.
I mean, it's like pumice stone.
Diatomaceous earth.
Stuff right here because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
food safe. So Damascus earth or Damascus
Diatomaceous earth.
I've never used
That's
that.
shell flour. So
what do you use that for, Dan?
I mix that with beeswax and stuff, and I made a paste, and I use it for sanding it.
Yeah, it's abrasive. I know diatomaceous earth is abrasive.
And it the between that and the wax and the mineral oil, that any little sanding marks that you have in it, it'll take them out.
You're essentially making abrasive paste is what you're doing.
Right. Right. In fact, I got a jar of it right here. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, the diatomaceous earth is a silicon sedimentary rock that's ground into a fine white powder. So yeah, you that's Scott's exactly right. You've made an abrasive paste with it.
Yep. Because it's a lot cheaper than buying that stuff.
Yep.
Yep.
The only concern I have about using that stuff, and maybe you guys can answer my question, it's got wax in it. So how do you put any finish over it after it's got, how do you get that wax off so that you can put your lacquers or whatever
know.
finish you want over the top of it?
I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Scott. Whenever I'm using an abrasive paste like that, I'm not using it on the wood. I'm using it on the finish. But that's just me. I know that if I use an abrasive wax base, like any of the other products like the Hampshire Sheen or any of that kind of stuff, that's also a wax based abrasive paste, that
Right.
I know that it's difficult to put a finish over it. Yeah, and Cade has written in that too. Yeah, you're right, Cade. You can't put a finish over it.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
see so many of the wood turners use this on the insides and outsides of their bowls, and it's like, well, how do they put a durable finish on when they got that wax in there? Because you never get the wax off.
I think
Right.
they're doing it after they put their finish on.
Well, I've seen them use this sanding paste, and then they never show you how they finish the bowl after they've used the sanding paste. And all your
Right,
sanding paste has some kind of wax.
They're using a wax based finish and then burnishing it or buffing it or whatever.
Buffing
Right.
it, yes.
Yeah.
But
That's
doesn't that, and maybe I'm just naive, doesn't that get sticky when it gets warm? Doesn't it leave
This-
fingerprints when it gets warm because of the wax?
This don't, because I use that sanding paste that I just showed you on this right here. And when you rub it in, it gets quite hot. And all my tools that I make in this finish, they just stay shiny. It don't come off on your hands. Your tools don't stick. There's never a fingerprint.
Any wax based polish I've ever used or wax based finish I've ever used, it goes dull with time, and it will show fingerprints. So, I mean, I'm not sure what it is. What's your wax base, and how long are we talking here?
Well, I've got beeswax, and it's been like 3 years. And mineral oil.
Beeswax is super soft. So
Yeah, and mineral oil, and that food grade stuff there, and it just hasn't come off, not a bit. And I've got tools that I use all the time for 2 years now, and it hasn't, no fingerprints, no nothing.
This is a piece that's done with Hampshire Sheen. That's wax on that over the finish. And it's Hampshire Sheen will not leave fingerprints. What's his name? Martin over in England.
yeah, Martin Sabin Smith.
That's
Yeah.
his brand. And man, things just come out like a custom car finish. It is beautiful.
So I think that he's using Carnauba wax, isn't he?
He makes he makes his own.
Yeah, I know he does, but I think that he's using, it's a lot different. The wax that he's using is a lot different than beeswax. It's not beeswax.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
agree. I'll brag on his over all the rest of them because I've used it a lot. And unlike you, I use the Yorkshire grit over the finish. And usually I put the Hampshire Sheen over that.
Yep.
Not always, just depends on the case,
So you finished that first, and you used those products to polish the finish.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you put your lacquer on or whatever you're going to use for your finish, and then that's your polishing agent essentially.
Yes. Sometimes when you get an overspray, if you happen to use a rattle can, you get an overspray. And you can take I use the Yorkshire grip, and I'm sure what Dan's got will work too. It'll make it just as smooth as glass.
Right.
And then
So
there's
you're-
that
Yeah,
scratch free.
and I've seen Martin's demos where Martin will put his colors on, and then he'll just go right to Hampshire Sheen, or right to the Yorkshire grit, and then the Hampshire Sheen on top of it.
Yeah.
And it looks great. I mean, his his finished pieces look great, and they look very like he's doing it very quick. But I think that you're probably right, Scott, that I think that what Joaquin's doing is putting he's putting more finish on before you get there, right?
Yes, I'm putting like maybe 3 or 4 coats light sealers,
Yep.
Right.
So
Okay.
you're basically
Alright.
doing what they're doing to a car when they buff it out.
Absolutely.
Essentially.
Not a lacquer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Or even the new cars now with the 2-stage finishes, they have to buff that second stage to get the actual shine out of it,
Well, in
protect it.
old school back when we was growing up with hot rodding and custom cars and stuff,
Yep.
you may put 21 coats of lacquer on a vehicle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It'd
And
be
you
like,
take half of them off.
yeah. Mhm.
You'd buff half of
Well-
them back to get the fisheye out of them.
You do.
Yeah. But we were also using turtle wax too, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
and buffing that and doing it like every week.
Absolutely.
These are the tools I made 2 years ago that I use just about every day, and they're nice and shiny.
Well, I'm sure it's getting hard. I'm sure that wax hardens up after time, but
In fact, I can still see some of the beeswax I didn't get out of this one, or wax. It's up in
Yeah,
there.
I mean, when I first started wood turning, I was using the friction polishes, the
Yeah.
Mylan's friction polish and stuff. And it wasn't very long. Like I was giving pieces to family and stuff like that, and I would see these pieces, and the finish would be dull, and the finish would be a little sticky or a little tacky, and then I got better at it, and it was still it would still get dull after 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So I just I stopped using all of that stuff, and I went to the more involved finishes for that reason, is because it's one thing if you're using a tool handle that you're going to be using, you don't really care,
yeah.
it's fine if it's fine if it goes dull or whatever after a couple of years or whatever, or you just sand it back a little bit, put more finish on, no big deal,
Well,
right?
The oils in your hands helps keep it shiny.
Right.
Shiny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the pressure and the heat from your hands and so on. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're burnishing it every time you put your hand on it to use it too,
Yep.
So yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's just
I mean, it's everybody's. You see everybody using it, and I'm so leery about putting wax on anything that I haven't put my final finish on.
yeah,
Not that I like
agree.
things shiny, but
Yeah.
I'm a satin guy. I like my satin finishes. Not much on high sheen.
I do a little of both, but if you're selling your work, the shiny stuff sells better.
Gloss.
So yeah, I mean, almost all my buyers are women, and women like things shiny,
Right.
you
Yep.
know, and it's, and I mean, I like a lot of the things, and it, I don't want the plastic look, right?
Right.
Right.
I mean, I like a lot of things shiny, but I don't like the plastic look. You don't want it to look like you've been dipping it in resin.
Didn't have
Was
a
that Joaquin?
wood's just polished. I don't
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
plastic look either, Matt.
Right.
I like more of a semi-gloss look, I guess.
Yep. And I do, easily 25% of my work is I'm doing satin also, or semi-gloss. So, and I like that too, so nothing wrong with it. That's for sure.
I think it just
Um,
depends on the piece and the wood in a lot of cases.
Right.
Yep.
Even the
Yep.
whether it's shiny or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot
And
of wood-
I think that if you got like a piece with high chatoyance in it, like a walnut, or something that's got, quilted maple or something that's got some really interesting chatoyance in it, then it makes sense to catalpa. Then it makes sense to do a shiny finish.
right.
because it'll really bring out the chatoyance.
Yeah.
Um,
I like to use a semi-gloss finish or a shiny finish on something that's natural edge to make it look wet. Make the
Yep.
bark look wet, give it that wet look.
yeah, and really bring, especially if you've got a highly figured bark like hickory or something
Yep.
else like that. It's yeah, you really want to bring that. You don't want that satin. You want that shiny, so you can really see the figure.
Yep. Catalpa is a good example of that. I really like to make it a wet look with that catalpa. The bark has got as much character as the catalpa itself.
I agree. I totally agree. And all the catalpa I've turned, I think the first one or two pieces were not natural edge, but after you see the bark, it's like, oh, I got to keep the bark of these pieces.
And it seems to stay on well.
It does. Yep.
It seems like it dries and stays on where some of your other barks don't stay on as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
I found you gotta put like super glue or something in to hold the bark before you turn. That when you get close, you put your super glue on it, and then you finish your bowl, and it will help stop the chipping of the bark and coming in the opposite way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's certainly good practice. Yeah. And you want to thin super glue so it wicks into the wood and cures inside the wood. So it helps hold things together.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always turn from the bark to the bowl instead of the bowl to the bark. So you're not blowing it off when you're coming off on the bark.
Right.
Right.
I usually finish that first inch of that bowl and never come back to it once I turn the outside of it, get it where I want it, don't come back to that bark till I turn the inside, and then I turn that first inch and don't come back to that inch again for the rest of the
Right.
bowl.
Right. Yep.
And I rarely use super glue to hold bark on. By doing it like that, I don't tend to knock the bark off unless it's going to just naturally come off on its own, and you can tell that when you start.
Yeah, well, some woods are better. Some woods are better than others. You're right, Scott.
Yep.
I turn a lot of box elder just because I've got a lot of box elder, and that bark doesn't stay on very well. I mean, you guys have seen that in some of the demos I've done. It's like,
I can't even get it to dry well enough to stay on.
Well, that's when you do what Dan suggests. You use the
Yep.
super glue. You got to use it.
Well,
now I got some
sanding.
I got some Siberian elm here that I think that bark. I think I could throw it on the floor and the bark wouldn't come off. It is the toughest stuff I've ever seen. It's been in my shop and moved around a dozen times and dropped once or twice because they're big pieces. And it's just as tight as the day I cut the tree down. And I haven't done anything to it, It's in big squares. It's just amazing how tight it is. And I cut so much of it off. Now I wish I'd have left more bowls with bowl blanks with bark on it. Now that I know that it stays on.
Well, sanding sealer will help hold it on, your bark on too.
Yeah. Yeah, anything that will tighten that transition.
Yep, lacquer sanding sealer in it. Then you can put whatever finish on you want.
Yep. And I've had pretty good luck with cherry too. Cherry seems to hold its bark pretty well too.
Yep. Yeah, that's my experience as well. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with cherry. It's been very cool.
So is anybody, Matt, have you done it? I know you get it there. A fellow dropped off about a 5-inch diameter by 18, 20-inch piece of plum. Have you ever turned plum?
I have not, but it's supposed to be pretty from what I've heard.
Well, the end of it looks awesome. It looks like I got a shadow ring. You got the heartwood, then there looks like there's a white shadow ring and then a darker shadow ring. And then your outer diameter of it looks like it's got another color in it.
Purple.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard stories that they get some really interesting purple color in the wood.
Yeah. Purple will sometimes come through on plum.
you want to highlight me, Matt, I'll show you what it looks like so you guys can see. It's really interesting.
And that,
Look at the different color variations in that end of that
Wow.
log.
Wow. Well, that looks like a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
most fruit woods, most fruit woods are really good to turn. So, you know, the pear I've got, the apple I've got, the cherry, we all know cherry. So yeah, it's all good.
And I
Very
think
cool.
I think the bark's gonna stay on this. This piece is, he told me it was about 5 years ago when it was cut down and stored in his bottom of his workshop carving pile. So I mean, it
Wow.
isn't even checked much. You know, the checks aren't deep, and the bark is tight. I mean, it's like there ain't a crack in it that I can see. There are a little bigger cracks on this end, but they're still they don't even come out to the bark. The bark didn't even crack.
That's weird.
So
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, very cool.
I just gotta decide what I want to turn out of it. I think I can get 2 pieces out of it. I might actually try turning it so that it makes an oval bowl, you know, a wing style bowl. It won't be very deep, but I think that'll be the best use of it and can leave some of the bark on.
like a banana bowl.
Like a banana bowl, yep. It's interesting. I told him he needs to find some more and bring me some more of the same tree. He tried carving it and said it was too hard to carve, so that's why he gave it to me.
Does he hand carve or power carve?
He's a total hand carver. Everything with knives and hand tools.
Okay. Okay.
No, he's the guy that's teaching me how to do the ball and cage
Okay.
that I've shown a few times. They got almost done, but he won't even let me use power tools on that. I got to hand chisel it all. So he's in the process of teaching me how to do this. Plus he's teaching me how to sharpen tools. I mean, I'd be afraid to drop one of his tools on my foot because I think it'd go right through my foot. They're like razors.
I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it.
And they shine, you know, the cutting edge is so shiny that you can comb your hair in it. I mean, they're beautiful. I've never seen him use a mallet ever.
Wow.
He does it all with just, you know, his natural strength. And right now he's 87 years old, and he's still carving pieces.
Good for him.
Yep.
He just did a red cedar or juniper ball and cage that was 20 inches in diameter, or 22 inches at the top, 22 inches at the bottom. And the ball inside the ball and cage is about the size of a red kickball.
Wow.
And that was all carved by hand. He's got 48 hours in it. And he posted the preliminary of it on his website. 5 hours later, it was sold for $7,000, and it's going to a lady in California.
Very cool.
She's actually driving here to pick it up.
Wow.
But he does 4 of those a year.
That's okay. That's a good living.
That's a good living. But then, you know, then he makes all kinds of little stuff too. But, you know, he's been a friend of my family since I was a little boy. And I got to thinking, I thought, I better learn how to do one of these ball and cages before he passes away and nobody, you know, learns that art from him.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, his own kids have no interest in doing it at all. So it's really a shame that you got somebody that's been doing this he told me the other day, he's been doing it for almost 70 years. And he has nobody he's only had 4 or 5 students in 70 years.
I just had an interesting experience this past weekend. Matter of fact, let me show you guys something here. One of the guys in my turning club, his father-in-law is moving into hospice, and he has spent much of his life making ship models. So this is one that I got from, I don't know, you guys can see this, but this is all done by hand, tons of little detail and stuff. And so what they decided to do was they decided to give all of these ships away, and there are literally hundreds of these things in this man's house. And so they're keeping track. Everything's got a description, on the bottom, and numbers. And this is a model of a frigate from the Barbary Pirate Wars. So, but what do you do with all of the ships that this man spent his life making? And it's I don't know. I think that giving the things away is a really great idea, because I've got something that I would never, I could never make myself, and I'm not sure that I would actually buy one unless I had a lot of disposable income. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which I don't at the moment.
None of us do, right?
Right, but this is so cool. Yeah, we're poor Turners, is what we are. But this is so cool, and it's like, now I've got one. It's like, I mean, these things are like museum quality. They should be in museums.
Yeah.
It's like, so, but they had this thing over the weekend where all their friends and family and everybody they know could come and take a ship or two, and my son was interested, so he came and he got one too. So, I don't have any idea where I'm going to put it because it's kind of fragile, but I don't really have room for it anyway, but I'll find a place because it's really neat.
I know when I went and seen my son at the military base, they've got glass enclosures, and they've got ships that are like that, hand built inside there, that
Yeah.
retired military guys have hand carved out.
So
Right.
here's the ball and cage that he just sold.
Wow. And that's that diamond willow, isn't it?
No, that is a piece of juniper, 22 inches on both ends, and
Wow.
24
Okay.
inches,
Oh, I see it. Okay. Wow.
and it's 24 inches high. So it's going to be an end table.
Wow, that's crazy.
And you think about how heavy that is. I mean, it took two of us to get it out of my truck, and he carved it, by himself.
Very cool.
I think you need to double the amount of time you're spending with him trying to learn how he's doing that.
So-
At his age, he's not going to be around long.
No.
You better squeeze in what you can while you can.
So that was 1 week after he started.
Oh my gosh.
So you think about
That's-
how much he did, and look at how square that hole is.
Yeah, that's spectacular.
Yeah,
And
to
he-
do it all by hand, it's just, I mean, I go to his shop and sometimes I sit there and just watch him. I'm in awe just watching him do what he does.
You can make one of them in 48 hours.
48 hours it took him from start to finish to make
All
that
right, let me
piece.
sit down.
So I mean
That's
that's pretty
good.
amazing.
Yeah.
Here's a lamp that's sitting on top of that same table. That's also a ball and cage out of the same tree. It's just a limb instead of the main trunk.
Wow.
Those are so cool, Scott.
Yeah, you just I sat and watched him make a pair of earrings that were maybe an inch around and an inch tall. He did those in an hour while I was over there working on my ball and cage. He started those when I started, and I left 2 hours later, and he had two of them done, one for each ear.
Very cool.
And all he used was a pocket knife for the whole stinking thing. All he used was a pocket knife.
He knows grain.
When I was young, my dad did a ball in a cage like that, and he did it with one of those extended packing knives. You know what I mean? Those.
Yep.
And he did it. He did he did a ball in a cage. It was probably about this big, and then he did the rest of the piece of wood. He carved into a chain, a linked chain,
Yep.
so that there was a ball in a cage on a wood chain that was all out of the single piece of wood. And he did it. He did that all by hand with one of those a box cutting knife. That's the word I was looking for. A box cutting knife. So it's amazing what people do.
Oh, and he makes a lot of his own tools, Matt. That's the neat part about it. He takes old fillet knives and regrinds them into specialty tools for doing this stuff. You know, it's not.
I do.
He's a tool maker besides a carver. You know.
Very cool. Very cool. We've all done some of that ourselves. So
Yep.
That's neat. Yep. And Dan's making handles and things like that. So
Well, Dane
Yep.
and I are starting to make tools, and now my wood carving friend here wants a hook knife, and he brought me some steel and says, "You guys fabricate the knife, I'll make the handle." So I'm in the process of fabricating him a knife as we speak.
very cool.
But I mean, it's
Right.
it's so neat.
I'm getting really tired here, guys. I got to bail. So
Yep. Well, thanks for
thanks for all
helping
the
me
help,
out,
Scott.
Matt.
my pleasure, Scott. And thank you for your help also. And we'll see you guys next week.
Sounds good.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Matt.
Good night, Matt.